Death Note is a manga serialized in the weekly anthology series Shonen Jump, over 108 chapters, collected in 12 volumes, written by Tsugumi Oba and illustrated by Takeshi Obata. Death Note follows Light Yagami, a bored misanthrope who's given a death note by the Shinigami Ryuk. If you write a name in the book, that person dies. Light uses this opportunity to take justice into his own hands and forge a new world, clashing with the brilliant and awkward detective L. Death Note is cool, but you probably know it as Death Note, the 37-episode anime adaptation produced by Madhouse under the direction of Tetsuro Araki, featuring writing by Toshiki Inoue. Death Note is an incredibly faithful adaptation of Death Note, which sets it apart from Death Note, the live-action movie directed by Shusuke Kaneko with a screenplay from Tetsuya Oishi. Death Note shifts the story of Death Note by making Light a law student, armed with a big book titled The Compendium of Laws, which he literally throws in the bin seconds before running into the Death Note. Death Note would receive further adaptations in Death Note and Death Note. Death Note is a J-drama written by Yoshihiro Izumi, whereas Death Note is a Netflix original movie directed by Adam Wingard that released to terrible reviews from critics and normal people alike. Death Note was immediately lambasted for bastardizing the source material, fundamentally misunderstanding everything that made Death Note Death Note. Unlike previous versions of Death Note, Death Note was unfaithful, and as such, was immediately cast into the flames and forgotten under an avalanche of Netflix originals. But not by everybody. Or at least, not by me. Hi, I'm Duncan Bucket, and in my new rebellious phase, I'm here to tell you
myself, but myself keeps slipping.
Before Wingard made Death Note, he was an indie horror guy. You're Next, Pop Skull, a kind of wank Blair Witch sequel, and I think you can see a lot of what made Death Note what it is through these earlier works. Specifically, The Guest, which he directed alongside a script from close collaborator Simon Barrett. It's time for a bias alert. I am an unethical bastard, and I fucking love this movie, so I'm not exactly the most unbiased source. The Guest is a movie where a former soldier, David, comes to visit the grieving family of one of his squad mates. He then attempts to help them all work through their internal struggles in unique and mysterious ways. He then tries to murder each and every one of them. Out of the gate, the movie's vibes are insane. We open on a very impersonal shot of David running, before a hard cut to the title card in the Albertist typeface, or as it's better known these days, the John Carpenter font. Wingard likes to infuse his work with influences, and specifically uses those influences to subvert what the audience expects. You're Next was a home invasion movie, akin to Black Christmas or The Strangers, before turning into a riff on Die Hard and Home Alone. The Guest begins almost as a sappy veteran movie like Home for the Brave or 50 other movies your dad probably likes, before shifting into its main influence, Halloween 3: Season of the Witch. The Guest features many direct references to the best Halloween movie, from the motif of the three masks, the movie's Midwestern setting, its synth-heavy, Carpenter-inspired score, all the way down to its mystery narrative. The film follows David, played electrically by Dan Stevens, who you might recognize from Downton Abbey, and the family, focusing on Anna, played by Micah Monroe, who you might recognize from It Follows, and Luke, played by Brendan Meyer, who you probably don't recognize from Dino Sapien. Anna begins to cling to David, but quickly notices that something is wrong with him, so she spends most of the movie trying to figure out what his deal is while he works his way into the family. A bit like how hot hunk of beefcake Tom Atkins solves the mystery of the masks in Halloween 3. Surprisingly, David doesn't turn out to be an anti-capitalist Irish druid. He's just an escaped army experiment intent on using the family to escape from Lance Reddick. This is the final influence shift of the movie. What starts as a heartfelt story about a grieving family turns into a mystery narrative before finally shifting into a Terminator-style slasher film, with David hunting down Anna and Luke. Dan Stevens is wonderful as a fucking psycho who just so happens to be the nicest young man you've ever met. All of this is tied together with Wingard's distinct and extreme style, which favours harsh neon, dread-inducing wide shots, and an 80s-infused licensed soundtrack. That's right. Years before the Duffer Brothers had run this entire style into the ground with Stranger Things, The Guest had a soundtrack of modern dark synthwave and 80s electronica, justified in the movie as the music taste of Anna. It uses these songs to inform character. A pivotal moment of the film is when Anna makes David a mixtape of her favourite songs. It's a romantically charged set of scenes as Anna starts to let her guard down around this dark and mysterious stranger. And as she goes to sleep, we don't cut away. The camera lingers as we pan to David's room and we see what he even does at nights. He doesn't sleep. He just stares despondently into the distance before we're hit with "Haunted by Your Soul." It's the best needle drop in any movie ever. This example is one of many. The final confrontation even incorporates the mixtape as a physical thing being played over the speakers by David. It's not surprising then that the movie's follow-up isn't even a movie. The Guest 2 is a soundtrack album of completely original music curated by Wingard and Barrett, released on April Fool's Day. Music is a core element in the work of these two creatives, and while Barrett had equal part in defining the movie, Wingard stated in an interview about that soundtrack just how much of himself went into The Guest. It's an incredible movie. Too good for me to cover in any great detail in a video about a completely different movie, so I'll cut it off there. But to recap, the things that I think are important to understanding Death Note are using twists and aesthetic references to other works to create something entirely new, and an extensive usage of licensed music to help inform the audience of what's happening and how that relates to character. And with all that out of the way, I can finally talk about Death Note opens on a montage set to Australian Crawl's Reckless, where we're introduced to our two leads. Mia Sutton, a cheerleader disenfranchised with her lot in life, and Light Turner, an angsty loner annoyed at the world. It's an instantly recognisable setup, all the way down to the stock bully who knocks Light out, which makes it even stranger when Ryuk shows up like he's from a completely different movie. Suddenly, the movie goes dark, as this coming-of-age setup concludes with Light orchestrating the grim fatality of his bully, so a Rube Goldberg-esque series of errors written in the Death Note. I can't exactly show you this because it's incredibly violent and I would like money, but trust me, it's pretty gruesome. Everything about this sequence echoes James Wong's Final Destination, a movie where death is personified as a force of nature, playing with its victims as it murders them in increasingly grotesque ways. It isn't a typical killer. Death as a concept is the character. Death Note takes this and builds it in a new direction. Light is the manifestation of death as a regular high school student, using Final Destination's concept of death as a template, paying homage to Wong's style and cinematographer Robert McLaughlin's killer camera work through these murder sequences. Once Light has the Death Note, he does what any teenager would do if given massive amounts of power. He immediately tells a girl about it so he can fuck her. Never change, Light, you Turner. Lucky for him, the girl Mia Sutton is excited by his ability to murder and wants in, so the movie focuses on their relationship and how they end up using the book. They start with petty crime but level up fast, eventually using the book to kill criminals around the world. Light and Mia are infatuated with each other, and their inevitable goal is to be known as saviors of humanity under the name Kira. Light wants to be known as that because Kira means killer in Japanese, so the police will think the killer is Japanese, but I like to think he's just a massive weeaboo. But the thing is, both Light and Mia are hypocrites. They want to act like they're just doing this to help people, and Light does have clear lines he's not willing to cross, like killing his own father to save himself when Mia suggests it. But he's still kind of a selfish asshole who's just using the Death Note to get a girlfriend, and Mia clearly enjoys playing that part. They attempt to manipulate each other, but under everything, they're just dumb teenagers in love. These characters aren't gods of death, they're kids trying to get anybody to notice them, finding any excuse to hang out with each other because they enjoy the thrill of the game they're playing. They play through all of the tropes. They have fun dates at the fairgrounds, a special spot where they can meet up away from prying eyes in the Ferris wheel, secret meet cutes in the library. There's a scene where they have a lovely dinner with Light's father, where he tells them a delightful story about Light's late mother involving a top hat. Then, at the school dance, their entire plan hinges on playing that couple. Light wears a top hat that they give to another guy to make the cops hired to keep an eye on them think Light is still at the dance while he lurks around the school. Even in this, they're still playing against each other, trying to get the upper hand. It's a back and forth as they attempt to swindle the book from one another without actually going as far as to kill each other, always working in an elaborate attempt to outsmart the book or include a stipulation. But when Light returns to the dance, Mia is dancing with that random guy and she shoots him a glance, so Light comes over and heroically shoves the dude aside, calling back to that earlier conversation. This is set to the most on-the-nose love song you could think of, Take My Breath Away by Berlin. The soundtrack shifts over the movie to show us their relationship, starting with very dark, apathetic synth tracks before moving to outright love songs because the movie is a dark comedy love story in the vein of Heathers. The music is telling us something that not even the characters realize about themselves. They are in love. And in their final scene together when Light is on the run, they make it to the Ferris wheel and the entire facade falls apart as they start screaming like children delivering sappy I love yous before Light gets the final move. He wrote her name in the book, and so the Ferris wheel contorts, throwing them down into the world below, falling in slow motion set to I Don't Want to Live Without Your Love by Chicago, before Mia is killed, slamming into a flower stand, and Light gets to live another day. He gets what he wanted as he explains his entire plan to his father in the hospital bed, but the most interesting part about his plan was that it's conditional. His plan hinged on her taking the book, and they were alone on the Ferris wheel, so he wasn't trying to trick anyone. He genuinely thought he understood the rules and could write a loophole into the book. And he failed, and he lost the one person who cared about him. He acts like a dejected teen wanting to fix the world, but he really did enjoy spending time with someone who loved him.
We could change the world.
We? Like we as in us?
The thing about this, though, is that it's quite funny. That scene where they start screaming, it's hilarious that they lose all pretension of the people they're trying to be and just start bickering before Light commits actual terrorism. And that's why I love Death Note. Not just this movie, but the original too. It's a story about the masks people use to hide their true intentions in the context of the criminal justice system, but it's also just really funny. Chapter 20 of the original Death Note, First Move, is an entire chapter dedicated to a friendly tennis match between Light and L. L, the enigmatic yet awkward detective, has enrolled in the same college as Light to keep track of him. Neither are fully aware of the other's motives, but they're both eager to befriend each other in hopes of coming out on top. We see the entire match play out through their inner monologues, playing a mental game where we get to see how they plan to one-up each other going forward. Back and forth with each swing of the racket and smack of the little round fucker. That's how tennis works, right? L wonders if the game is important to the investigation, but Light considers winning as a viable strategy to throw L off the scent because the killer would lose on purpose. Light deduces that there's an ulterior motive to the entire match, so he plays along, but L knows that Light is only playing along to get in on the case. The match becomes so heated that the entire school comes out to spectate the greatest match of all time. Light's a former tennis champ, so to see an outsider who can not only match him, but maybe even beat him, It's exhilarating. It's tennis, but it's so much more than that. Light is a serial killer looking for domination with the help of a god of death, and L is the ace detective hot on his trail, hell-bent on taking him down. This tennis match may end up being the most important event in human history. But it's not, and it never will be, because it's a fucking tennis match. They're two people playing tennis. They want to win because the goal of tennis is to win. None of this actually matters. It's an absurd scenario. Multiple characters point out how absurd it is. Why is there an umpire for this friendly tennis match at the ready? Why do they just play one set and then everybody leaves? These things are brought up in the chapter. It's pointing out the absurdity because the absurdity is the point. Death Note is a story about pointing out how stupid the criminal justice system is by just showing it for what it is. Egotistical man-children who think they're the greatest person who ever lived, doing whatever the fuck this is instead of just fucking like normal people. And it's hilarious. And this is why Adam Wingard's Death Note is the way that it is. As a director, I think he understands the dark comedy that Death Note needs, because under all of its veneer, Death Note is a farce, because the criminal justice system is a farce. And that's what defines Light and L's relationship. And while that relationship isn't as prominent in the movie, it's key to understanding what it's saying about the Western idea of justice. The only guy that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. That's a direct quote from Wayne LaPierre, the CEO of the NRA, in response to one of the most deadly mass shootings in US history. Light is a dejected teenager who is all of a sudden given a gun in the form of the Death Note, and he uses it to better society as he sees fit. There is a clear line drawn between Light, who sees himself as a good guy with a gun killing terrorists and mafia bosses, and the US government's response to perceived ills in society through the war on terror and the war on drugs. Wingard has said as much in interviews. Immediately after this, we're introduced to L, alongside his ward Wattery. He's obsessed with the perception other people have of him as the world's greatest detective, and he uses Wattery to placate his own ego. He talks about how he uses sweets to keep himself awake and has special glasses that regulate his body clock. He overthinks everything, and it's all just bullshit pseudoscience. He sees himself as a good guy with a gun, even if he wouldn't use a pistol because it's distracting. Light and L parallel in an interesting way. They both like playing up how big their ego is and how self-sufficient they are, as you can see in their first meeting, but they cling to the people around them, Light with Mia and L with Wattery. Light exploits this by using Wattery to find out L's real name, and through this we can see the cracks start to show. Light is trying everything in his power to prevent Wattery's death, despite being pressured by Mia and Ryuk, and L freaks the fuck out when Wattery goes missing. Light's plan fails and Wattery gets killed. Everything about both of their demeanors changes in this instant. L goes against the cops to chase down Light through the city, smashing everything in his path and brandishing a gun for the first time, throwing away his rules to catch Light. The chase leads Light to a dead end where L holds him up and Light instantly confesses. He wants to be seen as a vigilante god delivering justice, but he's just a kid with a book that kills people. At his core, he is terrified, in over his head, with no idea how to stop what he started. But just when things get juicy, a follower of Light's knocks out L, letting him escape, leading to the Ferris wheel. L fails to stop Light, and Light gets away with an alibi, and the movie ends on the note that L might end up using the Death Note on Light, throwing away his last slice of humanity just to get one over on him. Here's the thing. Light Turner is the platonic ideal of a school shooter. He's quiet, he's an outcast of traditional social hierarchies, he's white. When given a gun, he instantly goes for retribution. the first thing he does is kill his bully. It's a very Western idea of justice, that if someone wrongs you, you take revenge and blow them the fuck away. Light was pressured into it, but that's the thing. He didn't have a choice. He had to do it. But the system understands that what he did was not right, so it produces an opposition in L, because the only guy that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. But when handed the same power, understanding how Light did it, the first thing L does is take revenge. He's no better than Light. Both Light and L are pathetic. At their cores, they are pathetic people, acting like they're moral superiors when at the end of the day, they throw away any moral they have or the people they care for a slice of power. They act like they're different, but they're both the same. They're kids. You can't just give people guns and expect the world to sort itself out, because the world isn't fiction. People are more complicated than that. Because when everything is said and done, there are no good guys, there are no bad guys, there are only kids with guns. What is the original Death Note? This is a serious question. It's the manga, right? Written by Tsugumi Oba with art by Takeshi Obata. Open and shut case, no shit. But then you look at critiques of Wingard's Death Note.
Now, originally I was going to approach this video as a review of the movie for people who haven't watched the anime or read the manga.
Now, if you're unfamiliar with Death Note, it remains to this day to be one of my all-time favorite series, not just anime or animated series, just one of my favorite series in general. Written under the pen name Tsugumi Oba and illustrated by Takeshi Obata.
This movie just moves at breakneck speed when it just would have benefited by having slow moments of people thinking and being smart, like the original anime.
They use the anime and manga interchangeably, as if adaptation is meant to serve as a replacement of the original work. No matter what, even if an adaptation is as direct as the anime is, it's still its own original work, and it deserves to be treated as such because a lot of talented people worked on it. These talented people. In fact, there's a whole list of names like this. Because that's what credits are. Here are the credits in English. And you might notice, the original authors of Death Note are only credited with making the work the anime was based on, just like Wingard's version. But this is now subsumed into the original because it's faithful. Adam Wingard's Death Note isn't Death Note because it's not faithful. Despite the fact it's called fucking Death Note, it doesn't deserve that title because it's disrespectful to the original source, as is every live-action anime adaptation. This has always been a weird mindset to me because I don't think something being faithful actually matters. As in, I don't think that something being a faithful adaptation really makes it good or bad. Dragon Ball Evolution was a big dumb children's movie based on Dragon Ball, directed by James Wong, the Final Destination guy. After helping define what early 2000s horror was, its next big feature features a man sliding over a car with his hair. This is unrelated, I just think that's fascinating. Dragon Ball Evolution isn't bad because it's not Dragon Ball. It's bad because it's a bad movie. It's a generic kids action movie. It's not got much going for it. Its quality in relation to the original doesn't matter because it's not that. Something being a good adaptation shouldn't matter. You can ask why it's called Dragon Ball or Death Note then if it's going to change so much. It's because it's marketable. Whoever owns the rights to adapt the work thinks it will be marketable, so a group of creatives come along to work with the license to make something actually creative. This applies to almost all adaptation, including manga adaptations. They're partly produced to keep the brand image of the manga alive. If that's disrespectful, then all adaptation as it stands now is disrespectful. And yet people still use these types of arguments as justification as to why all live-action anime adaptation is bad. One of those critics I showed earlier, Cosmonaut Marcus, made an entire video about it.
But it is my personal opinion that if you agree to adapt an anime into a live-action TV show or movie for Hollywood, then it means that you are already disrespecting the source material. Because in any great animated work, the beauty goes beyond the story or the characters. Usually, it's good because it's animated. And as far as Western remakes go, to adapt anime into live action is to automatically remove 50% of the quality of the original work. That 50% is animation.
Wait, so if 50% of the quality of anime is animation, where does that leave the manga that anime is based on then? Is that the same value as live action adaptation? What's the going exchange rate on anime adaptation? Why can't these things just be bad movies or bad adaptations even? Why do they have to be disrespectful? There's a standard placed upon these adaptations that there just aren't for others. They use Into the Spider-Verse as an example of how audiences don't respond to animation in the same way they do live action. This is an adaptation that changes so much about the work it's based on. But nobody who isn't a racist, big asterisk there, is gonna argue that it isn't Spider-Man. And if you are, leave a comment. I'm genuinely fascinated in understanding your perspective. When talking about live-action anime adaptation, we default to these very moralistic terms. Is it faithful? Is it disrespectful to the original source? It's not enough to just say a thing is bad. It has to be evil. It's not about having an opinion on a piece of media. It's about giving people moral permission to say that it's bad, or write off people who like it as objectively incorrect or stupid for liking it, because it's not just bad, it's disrespectful, it's unfaithful.
Reason. But if this movie had a different title and didn't have Ryuk and changed the names a little bit, I think some people would actually like it. The same kind of people who caused Suicide Squad to make a ton of money would have loved this.
You're allowed to dislike The Thing. If you hate this Death Note movie, that's okay. You're allowed to do that. It's in your right. I respect that. But we don't have to draw imaginary lines in the sand or make shit up in an effort to defend the original or treat people like idiots for liking it. You're not defending the original artists, you're just devaluing the work of the actual artists without looking at the thing here that's really killing the art. Death Note cost $40 million to produce, and it made back absolutely nothing at the box office. Because it was never at the box office. Unlike Ghost in the Shell or Dragon Ball Evolution, it never needed to make anything back because what was being sold wasn't a movie ticket, it was a subscription. This is the Netflix business model, producing expensive content with no guaranteed return on investment with the hopes that they'll eventually offset the cost by selling you enough subscriptions and keeping you subscribed so you continue to consume their content. This is a stupid business model. They are in massive amounts of debt for a reason. But even though they continue to constantly cancel shows, there are still a few things they do consistently. Milk Squid Game, make 50 million seasons of Stranger Things with professional hacks the Duffer Brothers, and produce live-action adaptations. Gundam is getting a movie, One Piece is coming later this year, Cowboy Bebop already came out, and it's super easy to see why they keep doing this from a business perspective when you see how they push them. They always come along with a portion of, or all of the anime they're associated with. Recently, they added the 3 original Gundam compilation movies and Char's Counterattack. One Piece, first 300 episodes got added to Netflix. Cowboy Bebop doesn't just have the entire original available, it's presented as part of a collection with the live-action remake. It makes a lot of sense with their business model in mind. You get a new audience who'll watch a 2-hour movie and then stay subscribed for 13 hours of television, and the old fans who hate the new one still have to subscribe to watch the original. Netflix control the whole supply, and once you have them hooked and in the algorithm, they can watch all of the other anime things on the service. But then we're presented with a new problem. Netflix is exploiting all of these artists' work, original or adaptation, because they would very much like their brand to be associated with these franchise IP. Have you ever noticed that every single thing that Netflix gets exclusive rights to becomes a Netflix thing? You can see it on the posters for Death Note. It has no credits apart from a Netflix film. And after the horrendous reception to the changes of Death Note, their next major endeavor was Cowboy Bebop, which tried much harder to look like the original, enough to prompt side-by-side comparisons with the original, produced by the company itself. And you look at the poster to that, and it's a Netflix series. They want Netflix to be the home of anime, even if they didn't create it. So they're gonna do everything in their power to get the Netflix brand associated with that. That's how you get officially licensed Cowboy Bebop reaction videos with YouTubers whose names I don't care to learn, and the official Netflix VTuber. Netflix had a fucking VTuber, by the way. Her name was Enko, and she stopped appearing after last year, and I'm worried about her. What did you do to the VTuber, Netflix? Where did you put her? All Netflix adaptations going forward will look like Netflix Bebop. There are a couple of good episodes in that show, but it cannot escape from the fact that it is content gruel, designed to evoke the original on a surface level, stretched out into a dire television show to keep you in the pipeline. They're even redoing Death Note with the fucking Duffer Brothers. I cannot escape from these bastards, and you can bet that it'll be more faithful to the original story and have all the music from the anime and have a bit where Light eats a crisp. People fucking love it when Light Yagami eats a fucking crisp. So that leaves Wingard's version in a weird spot. It came before these adaptations started pushing for faithfulness, largely a response to how poorly received it was. It was a bizarre, different take on an established work that took the creative ethos of its director and injected it into the story. I'm scared that it's going to be forgotten. It's clearly not out of the realm of possibility considering how much original content is removed from streaming services every day, and the thing about Netflix releases is that they don't get physical releases. Unless you're high profile enough to get a Criterion release, you're stuck to streaming. I don't want it to become just another Death Note. I think it deserves its time in the spotlight. I think it deserves reappraisal. And if you've only ever heard anime fans dunking on it and you've never watched it yourself, you should. Because the only thing you have to lose is an hour and 40 minutes of your time, and if you dislike it, that's fine. But it deserves to be more than the other Netflix Death Note. It deserves to be understood as more than just another adaptation. And if you just want something to get mad at, here's an extended list of hot takes I have just to piss you off. The original Neon Genesis Evangelion dub is...
Password sharing detected. Authorities are on their way to your location right now.
Thanks for watching this video. Remember to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, the type of stuff that makes the algorithm happy. These videos are funded in part by my wonderful patrons like Fotail and Ink Assassin. If you donate, you can get all sorts of things like your name listed over there, and access to my new behind the scenes show, Dunk on Dunk, where I get down to brass tacks on how I make these things. So check it out if you can at patreon.com/alwaysbetondunk, and I'll see you on the next one.